And we've got some matchmaking in the NFL, right? And that's what the offseason is all about. And we've seen it now with the head coaches in the league. And Jonathan Gannon is now going to be the new head coach of the Arizona Cardinals. Shane Steichen is a match with, they said, we got our guy. That was their tweet with Shane Steichen. So both of the Philadelphia Eagles Super Bowl squad offense and defensive coordinators are now heading to new homes. DeMeco Ryans head coach of the Houston Texans. Sean Payton in the Denver Broncos. And Frank Reich was the first one hired, and he is the head coach of the Carolina Panthers. More on the Panthers and their QB and how that matches up with Derek Carr a little bit later. But the two newest ones, especially Jonathan Gannon here, that we haven't talked about yet, new head coach of the Arizona Cardinals. How are we feeling about these head coach hires, man?
Real quick, I mean, I think let's first start with the Eagles. I mean, the Eagles, we haven't got into free agency much. It's about a month away, but they have a lot of free agents to deal with, and now they just lost two coordinators. So I understand that they have two premium picks in the first round, which is amazing and almost unfair. But I have to think that Philly probably will have a worse roster next year than this year, especially if you include the coaching staff. You know, I mean, that's the price of being a Super Bowl, a great organization.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's no way around
it. Yeah, of course, we'll get into a little bit deeper later in the week, as we do when teams are eliminated. And obviously the Chiefs weren't eliminated, but tomorrow's show is actually a perfect time for it to really dive into those off seasons and how those things are going to happen. And for the Eagles, when you lose that many potential free agents and players, and there's some short-term contracts there and some older players that might be aging out of the NFL at some point very soon, if not this year, you got to replenish some young talent. They have extra picks. It's an interesting one. And now offensive and defensive coordinators on both sides. And that's what happens when you start winning is you start getting poached from all directions. It's hard to stay winning in the NFL. So as long as Sirianni and Hurts are the guys and they got the coach quarterback connection like the Chiefs, they'll be sticking around. They'll be okay. More on the details of how they should do their diligence here in the offseason, though, for the Philadelphia Eagles. Jonathan Gannon's an interesting one. And
let's start there.
The funniest thing to me is the immediate thing that came to mind for me is that Jonathan Gannon was a coach that knew how to utilize Hassan Reddick that the Arizona Cardinals used to have and couldn't find any coaches that thought he was an edge rusher. They're using him as the wrong position as an off-ball linebacker. It's like too late. It's too bad they couldn't have Jonathan Gannon 5 years ago when they drafted Hassan Reddick in the first round, and he was worthy of a first-round pick, but they didn't use him that way. And so I just thought that was kind of amusing. Is they're like, I wonder if that was one of the things where like, well, this guy's really smart. He could have made our past teams better, so surely he can make our future teams better.
So I'm not avoiding the situation, but commenting on these two men, especially Gannon, is really difficult for me, to be very honest with you. I mean, I just Wikipedia'd him. He's 40 years old. He was the defensive coordinator there for 2 years. I've never seen an interview with him. He's young. He's from St. Ignatius High School, which is in Cleveland. We used to recruit that school. Good school. Great. I mean, does that mean he's a good head coach for the Cardinals? I honestly don't know. There's not a lot of body of work as us as outsiders have to analyze him. I do understand he's young, he's smart, he's personable, but he's unproven, and dealing with Kyler Murray is difficult. And I will say the Super Bowl did not leave a good taste in my mouth with Coach Gannon. I mean, not, you know what I mean? Like he let up a lot of points, and watching the Super Bowl on a second time around, I just saw a lot of basic zones, basically just running out there saying, my players are better than yours. We have a great front four. What are you going to do about it? And didn't switch to much man, didn't make a lot of adjustments. I didn't think that was promising. And we know the Cardinals is not the most attractive job out there. How many people were banging down the door for it?
Well, it did seem like there was a lot of interest in Jonathan Gannon, at least from other teams, which is a good sign.
Right.
And he was, teams like the Broncos and I think the Colts interviewed both coordinators from the Eagles, if I'm not mistaken, as well. So it wasn't the only team that had some interest in Jonathan Gannon. I don't know if he was going to get the offer from any of those other teams or if he'd sold, GMs and ownership. And I think that's one of the connections. And anytime you're looking at a franchise and wondering, who's this GM going to hire as a head coach? Go see who they're connected to, because there's some connection to Monty Osenfort and Jonathan Gannon, which I think is part of this. And that can be a good thing as well. You don't want them to have blinders on when they're searching for their next head coach, but
You want a good working
work
relationship,
together.
though.
Yes,
Right.
absolutely.
They
And
have
so
to work
it
hand
seems
in
like
hand.
they would have that here in Arizona with Jonathan Gannon. But yeah, whenever the Eagles, it's fair to point to their path to the Super Bowl and point to whenever they played a team that had a really legit offense with a legit quarterback,
which there weren't many of them.
They scuffled a little bit, and it wasn't that often, right?
Right.
It's fair to point that out. So we'll see what it looks like with Jonathan Gannon, and it's possible that a guy's a better head coach than even a defensive coordinator. Not that he was a bad defensive coordinator either. So it's really just hard because we haven't seen him do the job. And we'll learn a lot more about Jonathan Gannon. I think when you look at the NFC West and you see offensive masterminds like Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay, and plus you just had an offensive head coach, I think it shouldn't be surprising at all that they win on the defensive side of the ball, the Cardinals.
I get it. There's been a lot of talk, and this is, everything always comes back to the Steelers, but I've been asked this like 10 times in the last week. Can a defensive-minded, conservative head coach win in this league? I don't know if this guy's conservative or not. How would we know? I just know he's defensive-minded and young. I assume he's analytically inclined, being a 40-year-old. I'm sure he's open to that more than Don Shula and Landry were, and Hallis and the old guys. But yeah. I don't know.
If he took anything from Nick Sirianni, he's not going to be conservative.
Exactly. And the Eagles were like the most analytically inclined team in the league too. So you would think that would carry over. I think that's promising. But again, it's just a big incomplete. I don't know. And frankly, I don't know if Shula, Landry, or Hallis could turn the Cardinals around. That team's in trouble.
It's a weird team, but their quarterback is supremely talented.
He is.
And if there's a connection there with the quarterback and they get that working, and they've got talent. They've got talent on both sides of the ball. Like it's a team that could still be
an early pick.
Yeah.
They
so
could end up with Jalen Carter
or Bidwell, your ownership, that's probably what you want to hear from the GM candidates and the head coach candidates. Like, we should be winning. We should be a better football team than we are right now.